Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of Truth Wanted. Hey! Woo! Listen to that audience. I'm your host, Objectively Dan, and joining me today for another fantastic, exciting episode is the legendary Bionic Dance.
Hello.
Woo! How's it going, Kate?
Oh, I've definitely been worse. How about yourself?
That's wonderful. That's the best. When you ask someone how they're doing, that's exactly what you want to hear. So in case you've been under a rock, Bionic Dance has been on the internet a lot longer than this show's been around. She's been making content on all sorts of things, talking about religion and science and stuff for a long time on YouTube. She's collaborated with a whole bunch of other people as well, and she's just awesome. And we recently got to meet at Faithless Forum for the first time, which was really cool. And I was like, hey, you should come on this show. And now she's on the show. So that's how this whole operation started. And yeah, welcome to the show, Kate.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah.
And it was great to meet at Faithless Forum. Faithless Forum was an absolute blast. So if you get the chance to go next year, please do.
Yes, it was so much fun. And yeah, this was my second time going. I went last year and just seeing, I got to tell you, I love seeing the people come out, the people who watch the content and stuff. And I also just love seeing all the other content creators and stuff. And we get to hang out because a lot of these people I talk to on the internet every day and stuff. And it's so nice to see these people in real life. And you get to meet cool connections like Kate here. So yeah, Kate, what's been going on with you and your channel? Like what kind of content you're making? What's up with that?
Well, my format has changed a lot over the years, but for the last couple, it's basically been I find someone who's saying something completely chowder-headed and then debunk the crap out of what they said. Mm-hmm. It's actually a lot of fun because I get to refine my arguments as I go. And because people make the same arguments. Theists have been making the same arguments for hundreds of years. And on the internet, they've been doing it for, well, as long as YouTube's been around and longer. Mm-hmm. So their arguments don't change much. It's always an absolute blast to find someone who's got a new reason why they believe in God. But because I've been answering the same arguments over and over and over for more than a decade, I've been able to refine my responses so that I say and a lot less.
Yeah.
And I've also been able to just find new ways, new holes in their armor to get under.
Mm-hmm. Do you tend to gravitate around certain kinds of people or certain kinds of arguments? Like, I guess I know you talk a lot about Christianity, but like, is there other kinds of philosophy and stuff that you delve into, or do you prefer talking about kind of the more religious kinds of things?
Well, the thing that I have perhaps the biggest issue with in terms of arguments is faith, the requirement of faith, that you can't have the proof of a God's existence. And I like to attack that particular, I guess I'll say fallacious position. But also a lot of my focus is on people who use religion as an excuse to treat other people horribly. Because I figure if I can debunk religious arguments, that they'll have to start justifying their bigotry to themselves rather than having this religious excuse for it. Mm-hmm. And so generally speaking, those are my targets. I mean, yeah, I tend to look at Christianity more than any other religion simply because I live in the United States, and the United States is majority Christian, at least as far as the religions people follow when they follow a religion. And so Christianity is usually my target. But when I see other people from other religions doing the same sorts of things to other people, then I look at their beliefs and how I can debunk those as well. I've found it's very rare for Jewish people to be making nuisances of themselves in this way, so I rarely end up talking to them or addressing their arguments, because I figure, hey, if they're playing nicely with the other kids, I can leave them alone. I may not agree with what they believe in, but there's no reason to attack them.
You know, that's interesting because, like, I think there's kind of a difference in culture between the people who are really into the apologetics and who are really into the kind of arguments and stuff, and then just the kind of casual believers and stuff. I definitely grew up. Yeah, I grew up in a Methodist Baptist home. It's kind of weird, and I never knew the word apologetics till at least I got to like college. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it came up in the youth group a few times, and like I had heard some arguments here and there growing up, and definitely through Bible studies and things, I heard a lot of the context for a lot of these Bible verses and stuff, but the actual study of like the argumentation and stuff and the reasons why people should believe in like this and that was completely different from my experience. I kind of had explained faith kind of the same way you did. It was just kind of an implicit trust in something. And this is a conversation I've been having with a lot of people lately about how people use this word faith to describe their beliefs, because it turns out that other people have been using it in other ways, and hearing other people kind of explain how they're using it and how they come to the conclusions that they do, being that, there's a God or Christianity is real in some sense, is really interesting, because I think there is a tendency, even as a Christian, to grow up in the sectarian kind of, I grew up in this specific denominational worldview, and then you don't really hear about these other kinds of denominational worldviews because you didn't go to those churches, But on the internet, as an atheist, I get to look at all the stuff and read all the things, so it's just great. Mm.
Before my parents adopted me, he was like, well, screw that crap. And so I watched him try just about every religion under the sun when I was a kid, but he didn't make me or my mom go on that journey with him. And I think more than anything, that helped me think, wow, religion is kind of goofy. Just because I saw so much of it, I didn't have to participate. So I'm just looking at it from the outside. And that kind of helps a person realize that, it's really easy to switch from one to the other if you're of a mind to, and if no one's forcing it on you. In my sillier moments, I like to tell people that I'm a Lex Lutheran, but that's just me being a geekatron over here.
Yeah.
No, but it's also kind of strange having grown up with no religion when you're in an atheist activism sort of community, because everyone else seems to have this story of their journey from faith to atheism. A lot of people have endured abuse. A lot of people really struggled with the fact that some people are still afraid that they're going to go to hell, even though they don't believe in a God anymore, just because of how indoctrinated they were. Mm-hmm. And when I hear these stories and I see people actually bonding over them, I kind of, in a weird way, feel left out. And I'm glad that I had the non-religious upbringing that I did. But at the same time, I don't have anything to say when people are talking about that. It's almost like they're in a support group and I'm just sitting there going, well, I can't include myself in this. Yeah. It's very strange, actually.
That's really interesting. Do you think, like, if we're talking about atheism as a movement, as a part of an activism, right? I mean, you've been in the activism scene for a while. Do you think you're a minority in being in the movement and not growing up in a religious tradition? Do you think more people in this movement actually came from religion than actually weren't part of any religion at all?
I do think that, yes. Just based on my interactions with people, the people who have told either me or other content creators, you helped me see the flaws in religion and become not religious anymore, and all of that. And the very few people who say, oh, I was never a theist of any sort. The number of polls I see on Facebook in groups addressing religion or specifically about atheism, where it says, what was your religion when you were younger? The always atheist group is almost always the smallest bar on those polls. In fact, sometimes I was always atheist isn't even included on there because it's assumed that everybody had a religion before they became an atheist. Mm-hmm. And that is an assumption that is really difficult to get past, not just with atheists, but also with theists, because a lot of their arguments revolve around the idea that an atheist is a lapsed theist, that there is a God-shaped hole in your brain somewhere that has to be filled with something. So yes, definitely a minority, for sure. I mean, not in any kind of political sense where I feel oppressed by it or anything, but definitely numerically speaking.
That's really interesting because I agree with you. I think most of the people who are doing this kind of activism and stuff came from a background of religion, at least to some degree. And I'm wondering because I have a sense when I'm talking to people, and maybe you have this too. Maybe I'm crazy, but I have a sense when people never really grew up religious. Like I can kind of tell that you never grew up religious, and also kind of based on your videos, I think there's a difference in the sensitivity in which people talk about kind of these topics. I find, and again, this is just me spitballing, but it seems to me that the people who didn't grow up with religion, again, just like will full on just slam the whole thing, just call the whole thing bunk, and just no shits given when they talk about a lot of these topics. When sometimes people who grow up in the religious world are a little more empathetic sometimes, but a little more like, oh yeah, like I had this experience and stuff, and this is where I'm at now. And everyone else is just kind of like, nah, I don't give a fuck. Like this whole thing is kind of stupid, and I never liked this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And I will admit that I often take a no holds barred approach to it. But honestly, I've said it many times on my videos on my channel that for me, this is kind of like self-defense. Because if you look at, as I say, some of the abuses that people use religion to excuse their trespasses against others. I mean, I'm a lesbian. I have plenty of other LGBT friends all across that spectrum. And then there's the people who agree with birth control, for example, the people who don't think that we ought to be a religious nation here in the United States, all of that. We do need to defend ourselves against the people who would force religion on the rest of us. It seems like a lot of theists, especially Christians, have this view of what the country should look like, the way your neighbors should be behaving, what they should believe, the way they should dress and interact with each other, that it should be mom, dad, 2.5 kids and a dog and all of that stuff. This sort of 1950s stylized version of the United States. And that a lot of that seems to have a religious tone to it. And the way I see it, everyone should be just treating each other with respect, being nice to each other, and tolerating each other's differences. But they don't seem to see it that way. And if I want to live the way I want to live, the way I'm most comfortable, and the way I'm not hurting other people, I have to defend myself against them. Have to.
Yeah, like my experience of it was the Christian way of life was like the best way of life. Like if you try to do these other things, if you go down these other paths, Kate, then you're gonna fail in some way. Your sins are gonna catch up to you. Your temptations are gonna catch up to you, right? Like if you're having sex before marriage, or if you're engaging in homosexual relationships and stuff like that, then like ultimately you're not going to live your best life. Like that's kind of the way it was framed to me. But I think I agree with you in that there's an evangelical component to that says, no, not only is this the best way of life, but I want you to have this way of life, and you need to have this way of life, or else you're literally going to burn for eternity in a lot of those kinds of cases. And yeah, that sucks. And there's definitely, I was hearing something recently about how Christian nationalism it has been on the rise lately in some circles. And it's not something that's been going down. It's actually the rhetoric has been kind of coming up more, and it still retains kind of a popularity. I don't know if there's more people getting involved, but there's definitely stories you can read now about some of the influences and stuff, especially if we're talking about our education. Oh gosh, the recent abortion bill stuff. Don't even get me started on that stuff in Georgia. But yeah, you're definitely right. There is a political influence that's happening that we definitely should talk about more.
Well, okay, granted, completely tongue-in-cheek, but I've been telling people that I engage in the best birth control. Every woman should be a lesbian, especially the hotties.
I like that. That's really good. That's really awesome.
I mean, okay, granted, my sense of humor is not for everybody, but I find it amusing.
I know. That's great. That's great. I just want to remind people who are watching, this is a live call-in show. If you want to talk to Kate right here, the number is on the screen if you're in our chat. So definitely check us out. We got a couple lines here. So you've been doing some more projects and stuff. Do you see yourself as a content creator? Like, is the debunking thing, is that just your thing? Is that something you just want to keep doing till the cows come home? Or is there other kinds of projects you want to get into? Or what's up with that? Like, are you looking into anything else, or just keep on?
Well, I am actually working on an animated project, a very large animated project. For those of you who aren't subscribed to my channel, what the heck's wrong with you? You should be. But if you are, you know that I animate. I animate quite a bit. I use 3ds Max, a really old copy of 3ds Max, but it's what I can afford. And so I'm working on a narrative fiction project. It's very sort of sci-fi, retro, space opera, Buzz Lightyear, Spaceman Spiff, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers kind of thing. And I will actually be putting out a casting call at some point when I'm ready. So if anyone out there can act and you want to be in this project, I have 6 speaking parts so far. So we'll see.
We'll put me down on that list. I'd be interested.
So that is a project I'm working on. And one thing I have to keep reminding people is that as much as you only see me on YouTube online, I do have a life outside of it. I do more than just this. So yeah, I mean, I play a lot of virtual reality. If you know the game Spark, join me. It's an absolute blast. And I rollerblade. I have a gaming night that I might be late for if I'm on this still. So appreciate that I'm making that sacrifice for you guys. And bunches of other stuff. So yeah, as far as the channel right now, I mean, yeah, debunking stuff has been my format for quite a while. I have been thinking about branching out, but I'm not really sure what to do. I'd like to be a little more involved in, say, collaborations with other YouTubers, podcasts, and live streams like this one, that sort of thing. But I don't really have any immediate plans to change my format or to do anything particularly new. I maybe branch out on topics a little bit, but I'm always worried that my viewers who are so used to nothing but atheism content will rebel a little and say, hey, this isn't what I signed on for. So it's kind of a balancing act there.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Like if Truth Wanted suddenly changed format tomorrow and we did some sort of, I don't know, if we became an animated weekly show or something, I'm sure people would freak out about that too. Yeah, there's definitely the balance of trying to get your audience what you want, but also do the kind of thing you want to do and stuff. And so I'm glad to have you on, and thanks. And I do appreciate your sacrifice of your game night tonight. We'll try not to keep you too long, but we got some calls here now if you're ready to take them.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. I want to get to this first one. This was Charles from Fort Worth, Texas. Charles actually called in a few weeks ago. I don't know if you guys remember this. Maybe this was a few weeks ago. Asking us about the goddess of Columbia. And Charles, why don't you take it from here, man? How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Going good, dude. What's up?
Not much. Where do you want me to start?
Kind of backtrack for us again, like what this conversation was about, and maybe what you've since discovered from then.
Okay, I'll start from the beginning. I was looking at some poetry through Phyllis Wheatley. She was a slave back in the Revolutionary War, and she wrote some poetry about the goddess of Columbia. And what I found is, I don't know if she created the goddess of Columbia or it was the founding fathers, but she wrote the poetry that made, kind of make her like pop out there and people know who she was. Because Benjamin Franklin was in the occult, and Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, James Madison, they were all into the pagan rituals and symbolism and stuff like that. So they kind of came up with
okay, that's interesting.
Of Columbia as well.
I don't know if I want. That's a whole other rabbit hole we could jump down, talking about whether those guys are really into the occult. But really, I want to get to like, okay, so why does this figure in this kind of poetry interest you, and why do you believe like this is talking about something like in reality? Like you do, like I think from what I gleaned last time when we had this conversation, you believe that there is a kind of Columbia goddess out there.
There's symbolisms of her all over the United States.
Okay.
Well,
What's
can you describe this goddess? I mean, I don't really know. I don't know what to picture. I mean, my cat's name is Columbia, and she's a goddess, but I don't think you mean her. So,
you got Freya and Isis and all them. It's more like she's more like a symbolism, like she's the personification of what America is.
Okay, but she's
liberty.
Do you actually believe that Columbia exists as a being?
Yeah, I was about to ask that.
What she exists is as a symbol.
Okay, because last time we were talking about this, I was getting the impression that you thought of Columbia as a being, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
But the one cool thing about the argument that you can have with somebody is okay, like America was founded, and by the founding fathers after the Revolutionary War. They made the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all that good stuff. And a lot of people want to say, oh, well, it was founded on Christianity. Well, if you think about it, if they came up with the goddess of Columbia, and they kind of went off of Christopher Columbus and kind of made a female version for them. And they got the idea off of a Greek and Roman goddess called Liberta. So they got all these capitalist ideas basically from some old Greek and Roman ideas. I know. So if you really think about it, were we founded on Christianity or were we founded on paganism? So those are a lot of pagan symbols.
I mean, there's definitely an argument to be had about.
It's a good argument.
There's an argument to be had about, I think, the United States being founded on, like Greek principles and stuff. Like Greek values and stuff like that. Obviously, you see a lot of Greek architecture and Roman architecture, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, and she's the Statue of Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Columbia pictures. In D.C., what does D.C. stand for? District of Columbia. I mean, she's everywhere. Okay, and when you go to the courthouse and you see the blind lady with the scale and the sword, that's Columbia.
But maybe we should tackle this because
she's everywhere.
I definitely see the symbolism. I definitely think there's a history of that. You can definitely prove that. But as far as the people who were making these objects and were kind of inspired by these old ideas, whether they actually believed there was a Columbia figure.
And you know what? Another thing is they were all tied to the Masons, the Freemasons.
Okay, well, we need to keep on one track here because we can go all over the place. But
I can't tell you too much about the Freemasons because that kind of comes you into a wall because you don't know anything about the Freemasons unless you're a Freemason.
Well,
the deep dark secrets of what they do.
Supposedly, yes.
So that sounds like something sort of like an Illuminati kind of thing here now.
What's that?
This is sounding very Illuminati-esque, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's some symbolism there. I mean, but it's more Freemason than Illuminati because that's like a whole another group.
Man.
A lot of people think they're the same group, but it's like, no, that's two different groups.
Okay, so
I just mean there's a vibe. That's all I'm talking about.
Okay, so just to back things up, you don't actually believe there is a Columbia, but you believe that older figures of history were kind of inspired by ancient symbols and writings possibly and things to kind of put these kind of, I guess you would call it pagan symbols in America.
Yeah, and you know what? She was actually on the money. She was on our currency till 1956. And then she was taken off the bills, and then that's when they put the In God We Trust. Because Russia had the communist thing going on, and they were the anti-God, and so we had to have the God thing going on with our money. So that's when they took her off the money on the bills, and in where is it? She was and Reagan took her off the coins in 1980s. She was called the Stand in Liberty. And she was on some of the coins that we had.
So do you think
silver dollar bill?
Yeah, go for it.
My question has to be, what did they think they were going to get out of this? I mean, if it's not a literal deity, then are they worshiping something? Is it just a set of principles with a symbol attached to them? I mean, what exactly is this? Is it a religion, a cult? Is it just a bunch of people who got together and said, hey, let's have a club? I mean, what is it?
No, it's just the founding fathers looked at like, okay, like all these other people have a god, and the great Greeks and the Romans had a goddess, and so they were like, why can't we have a goddess? So they made their own goddess up.
Okay, but they made it up. So what exactly? I mean, how strongly did they hold this belief?
But even though they made her up, even now it's what she symbolizes. She symbolizes patriotism. She symbolizes America. She symbolizes liberty, freedom, everything that we cherish in the Constitution. She is that symbol.
Just a symbol, then. I mean, okay, I can imagine being dogmatic about certain values, but it still
she's the red, white, and blue.
Okay. I don't know. It just, I'm trying to figure out, is this something that if you were a Colombian knight or whatever the heck, was that enforced in some fashion? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out exactly how this works.
No, it's just more patriotic, It's just like it's for specifically like me. I'm a pagan, so it's like all right. So we got a goddess, a pagan goddess that's actually our goddess. Like I don't have to like say, hey, your goddess over there is pretty badass, but you know what? I got Columbia over here. The patriotic goddess.
And so,
okay. I mean, honestly, if I were to come up with an analogy here, it almost sounds like the Pastafarians, where they go, okay, now we have the flying spaghetti monster, which basically represents not actually believing in a religion. And I mean, it sounds like it's just sort of, taken a little more seriously, but still just sort of something they came up with for fun.
Mm-hmm.
She's a symbol all over the United States. She's on the state capitol. She's Statue of Liberty.
Right, but that doesn't. But we're just saying that doesn't make her real, right? That's kind of the difference. Oh, don't know what the camera is doing here. Oh yeah, that's right. There we go. Yeah, thank you for giving context to this guy.
But you can look at the American flag like, okay, it's just a flag to some people, but to us, it's more than a flag. It's a symbol.
It is a symbol.
Well, some people take that symbol way the heck too seriously. I mean, I remember some people completely lost it when someone else flew the flag upside down. They thought it was some sort of like anti-patriotic thing, when actually technically flying the flag upside down is a sign of distress. And they were trying to say, well, this country has issues with it. But I mean, people flip out. Like I've heard people say that you have to destroy a flag that's touched the ground. I've heard people act like burning a flag is an act of
no, I'm not down with that. Like
treason or whatever. So I mean, sometimes people look at those symbols and they take them way the heck too seriously, when honestly they don't mean as much as they think they do.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I was in the Boy Scouts, we had our own flag burning ceremonies. And I say flag burning because, well, it was actually a flag retirement ceremony. What happened was we'd taken a bunch of flags that were kind of donated, that were raggedy or kind of out of use. And we actually had to have a proper kind of ceremony to properly dispose of the flags. And that's kind of interesting because I don't think people really know that, like, oh, yes, there is an appropriate time to burn those flags, but only if it's within a specific circumstance, which is kind of cool. And it kind of also brings us this idea of, wow, if somebody were to look at this out of context and see, oh, these people are burning flags, people, this is awful. This is terrible. Like, why are these people doing this? This is something against our country and stuff. But it's like, no, actually, this is the guided practice. Like, this is what you're supposed to do with these things. So it's interesting that we come up with these rituals for these symbols, for these kind of abstract ideas, and they can seem very powerful to us in a way. And it sounds to me, Charles, that this is what Columbia kind of is to you. Columbia is kind of this powerful symbol by which you kind of draw a mythos from.
Yeah, like she's she's more like an inspiration than anything. Because I just think it's like really, really cool, and that it's a part of history that it's sad that it's not really well known, and I'm kind of glad I've kind of stumbled on her story, and now it's like when I look everywhere, I can be like, oh, there she is, there she is,
Mm-hmm. I think the one point of contention I might have
I think it's cool as hell. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's cool too that you found something you're inspired by and it kind of motivates you, and it's really cool. I think the one thing I'd be interested in is, are all these people really influenced by Columbia in particular, or maybe they're kind of espousing these values kind of separately, and it just so happens that a lot of these values are kind of related to this specific goddess. Like, I don't know, you could be really into wrestling or something, or into like boxing or something, and you could take a lot of these symbols from, I don't know, the god of war or something, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually worshipped the god of war or anything like that. I guess Mars is the Roman name. I can't even think of I'm so tired today, guys. I can't even think of the actual name, but you get what I'm trying to say here, I think, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
well, and also just from you saying like, oh, there she is, there she is, there she is. It sounds like spotting Easter eggs in movies and video games and stuff. I mean, like there's this one little one that I actually really think is awesome. Is there's a license plate that is in so many movies. It's 2GAT123. It's like the 555 phone number of license plates. If you know about that, you will see it everywhere, just the way you were talking about seeing Columbia everywhere. So, I mean, it sounds like an Easter egg, a political Easter egg.
Yeah, and there's no Illuminati that's making that happen either, right? It's just a bunch of people that are kind of in on the joke.
No, it's based off the something that founding fathers and a great poet, Phyllis Whitney, came up with.
Mm-hmm. I was talking about Bionic Dance's comment, not necessarily your thing, but yeah, I mean that one day, Charles, you'll have to like really dive deep with us. Maybe if you call in again sometime, we'll talk about the Illuminati and the Freemasons next time, because that's something we have not.
I tried digging into that, but I always find myself into a brick wall. It's like, man, I was like, I wonder what they know or what they're teaching or something, because
or if they're real. I mean, at least with the Illuminati,
they're always like, you got to become one. I'm like, I don't want to become one.
So okay, I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen this, Kate? There's a thing on Instagram where people get messages saying like, "Hey, I'm from the Illuminati. Come join our thing."
Have you got one? I got one.
My girlfriend got a message with one of those, which was kind of interesting. I think they're just kind of messing around. I don't think it's actually the Illuminati contacting people on Insta.
I told one guy, he's like, oh, you're a pagan. He goes, and you're a witch. He goes, if you join us, we'll teach you all the secrets. I was like, I want to keep my soul a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's like, I think if you're a part of the Illuminati, you'd find a more subtle way than Instagram messages. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
He found me on Facebook. He was just like,
oh yeah.
He's like, you're a pagan, and he was all getting into my own paganism. I said, I like to kind of do my own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, Charles, this was an interesting call. Thanks again for calling to talk to us about this. And yeah, next time, Illuminati. Let's go there. Let's do it.
Man, let me see what I can dig up on them.
All right, I love it. Thanks again, Charles. Yeah, Goddess of Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting stuff.
Like I said, my cat's name is Columbia, and I named her half after the space shuttle. So, I mean, again, he would probably point out, yeah, well, look, we have a space shuttle, NASA's space shuttle named after the goddess Columbia. I'm sure he would have said that. I just didn't have a chance to mention it while he was still on the phone.
Yeah,
the other half of her name is from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, just saying. Anyway.
Since I've gotten to know a lot more people in the pagan community, namely Ocean, right? If you're familiar with him, but I've learned more about how mythos is kind of treated in these circles, and it's not the importance on whether or not these are beings and stuff is kind of it's not as important as the inspiration that kind of is drawn from a lot of these things in some of these cases, right? And that's kind of the vibe I've gotten here. I could have sworn last time we talked, he wasn't. I'm pretty sure he was agnostic on the idea of whether or not Columbia was real or not, which was kind of an interesting conversation because I wanted to explore that. But then he said he'd come research, and now here we are, just kind of talking about it. But yeah, Charles, that was cool. I love those kind of things because it's just new, right? It's just like cool. Let's explore it from there. Just want to remind people. This is a call-in show. We have open lines, so if you want to come talk to me and Bionic Dance here, we are open for business. I'm ready for the next call if you are.
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Okay, so this is Brenda in Minnesota. Brenda, how's it going?
Good evening. How are you doing?
Doing great. How's it going?
It's going just fine here. It's a balmy 60 degrees here in Minnesota.
Ah, fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been to Minnesota, but I'd love to go there one day.
It's the glorious People's Republic of Minnesota.
Oops. I should put my phone in airplane mode.
Oh, that's okay.
So I wanted to ask Bionic. First of all, I subscribe to your channel, and
Excellent.
secondly,
Thank you.
yes, and also I just wanted to ask you. I'm a trans woman, and I just wanted to get your input or just your experiences as a lesbian woman, being an out atheist on YouTube. It's got to be pretty bad. I mean, it's bad enough for me. I would be terrified of starting my own, doing my own content and stuff like that. And so what is it like for you, and how do you deal with it?
Great question.
It's actually not bad at all. I mean, okay, granted, much like I was saying before, where I didn't grow up in a religion, I was also raised by extraordinarily left-wing hippies in Vermont, one of the first states to have civil unions, if not gay marriage. And then I've lived in Seattle and Southern California. So when it comes to in-person discrimination, I really haven't felt any. And on YouTube or online, well, lesbianism seems to be pretty cool. Most people think it's hot. So, I mean, I really have not had much of a problem beyond the occasional person saying, lesbian, like that. I mean, and it usually comes off tongue in cheek too. Like when I see arguments against lesbianism, it's really rarely directed at me personally. It's usually looking at other people being bigots generally, and calling people names or saying God hates you or whatever. And so I quite eagerly go after those people to debunk their homophobia. But honestly, for me, my own experience, it hasn't been that bad. It really hasn't.
I'll tell you this, though, when we went to Faithless Forum, I don't know if you remember, but we had that panel about female content creators online and their kind of experiences. And Rachel Oates was on that panel, Shannon Q, and a bunch of other people. And that was really interesting to see just the kind of messages these people got, just the kind of things they faced online. And I think it's definitely going to be a different experience for everybody. I certainly, I think I've gotten a bit of flirting here and there maybe, but I think in general, from the female content creators I've talked to, it's much worse as far as the sexually explicit comments that a lot of them receive and stuff, and I mean sexual violence in some cases.
Okay, what's funny? I mean, I have never received a death threat, and I mean maybe this is tempting fate, but I've also never received a dick pic.
Whoa.
I mean, yeah, I
think you're an outlier.
In a weird way, I'm like, what am I, ugly over here? What's wrong? But I mean, occasionally I will get the sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge from people, or I'll get people telling me in a more complimentary way, hey, you're hot, which I think is weird. What's wrong with your taste, people? But still, I mean, when I saw that panel, I was like, again, I know it's stupid. I know it's weird, but I was feeling left out in a weird way. It's like, am I not worth harassing? Is that it? I don't know.
Oh,
it's
my gosh.
strange.
I don't know. You were going to say something, Brenda.
Well, in my experience, there seems to be a special targeting for trans persons, male to female, as well as probably also female to males. We're pretty much, the GOP, the conservatives have sort of passed by the LGBT or the lesbians and gays and pretty much focused their hate speech and rhetoric against trans people. Although I wouldn't hold my breath because I'm sure they'll get back to you later at some point. And I was just curious about your experiences in that, because I do debate people online and on YouTube debate channels, and I do get a considerable amount of hateful comments when I'm in a live feed or anything like that. And I was just wondering what your experience was. That was basically it, Bionic. And by the way, check out Blender 2.8. It's looking really good.
Well, I got to say I've been trained in 3ds Max, and I have that big, huge project I'm working on in 3ds Max. I cannot afford to change horses in midstream, but I have heard a lot of good things about blenders. So yeah, maybe in a few years after I'm done with this big project of mine, I'll look into it. But thank you.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's whatever.
But also, I mean, that's a very good point. Like the whole transphobia thing does seem to be big in the scene lately. I mean, there's been a big dust up with rationality rules recently. And I did watch TMM, the Messianic Manics breakdown of, what was it, Sargon and some other guy having an argument.
Destiny.
And it seemed like Sargon's whole point, like it could all just boil down to who can I try to fuck without triggering my homophobia? That seemed to be his whole thing.
Yeah, well, Sargon is a typical. He's basically change scary, and the world is changing, and I'm afraid, and I can't handle it. That is basically the entire conservative movement in a nutshell. Is there the world is changing, and I can't handle it, and I'm afraid, and I need people to tell me that I'm going to be okay. I need my blankie, and I need my safe space, and I don't want to be triggered.
Well,
it does seem like conservatives desperately need someone to hate because for a good long time, it was Black people or people of other colors. Then they move on to homosexuals. And once that became socially acceptable, now it's trans people. And I've actually wondered, like, once trans acceptance is a thing, who's next? Who's next in their crosshairs?
It'll be the AIs.
Man, I have not considered that, but you're probably right. Shoot.
If you keep track, look up some of the recent research in AI funding, and you'll be scared out of your pants. Because it is moving, and it's moving fast, and they're getting good.
Wow.
It's funny you should mention, because, I mean, if the shirt doesn't make it obvious, I've been playing a lot of Fallout 4 lately, and the whole thing where the humans hate the synths, the sort of human-looking robots, like replicants from Blade Runner, that is a huge part of the plot. And so you might have a point there. I mean, it might be sort of prescient, a sort of look to the future of what's coming. I don't know.
Well, Deep Blue recently has made extreme advances in playing Go, and a long time ago they used to tell me that computers would never be able to play Go. They could play chess because the rules are so precise, but Go was very, very hard. And now we have computers, Deep Blue, that can beat grandmasters in Go. And the computer, they're programming in creativity, and they're being creative. They can compose text that is indistinguishable from what a human might write within a specific area or something like that.
There's actually a program out there, a website out there that can compose music that sounds very real. It's called Juke Deck. They've taken it down right now because they're working on something new. But I mean, it's almost indistinguishable from human-made music. It's crazy, and I love it.
Yeah. And then there was the two AIs that they allowed to talk to each other, and then they started talking in their own made-up language, and the people freaked out and disconnected them.
Yeah. I seen that too. Man, there's so many weird AI stories, like all the AI Twitter bots and stuff like that. Like, it's very strange. It's a Black Mirror is happening. We just have to figure out which episode it is, right?
Yeah. Fuck those dogs in Black Mirror. Oh my God, no, not the dogs.
I know. Well,
anyway,
thanks for calling, Brenda. This was
Bionic. I love you. I love your work. Keep it up. I hope this project does well. You're doing great.
But by the way, would I know you by a certain username? Like if I saw you responding to a comment, how can I know it's you?
Oh, it's Brenda.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Brenda.
Fair enough. Oh, look. I like being able to connect with people because when I was at Faithless Forum, or if every now and then it does happen, I get recognized on the street, I always ask someone's username just so I can make that connection. Because it's weird. When I went to Faithless Forum, there were a couple of people who were just sort of staring at me like, it's BionicDance. Oh my God. And I'm like, dude, I'm just folks, So being able to have that connection with people to know who you are in meat space as well as in cyberspace is important, I think.
Here's how to tell who I am. I'm the really smart, witty version of ContraPoints without the fashion sense.
That's great. I like that description. Brenda, thanks again for calling. This was awesome.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, we'll hear from you again. Yeah, man. So the AI thing. So I had this conversation one time when I was a Christian with some people. I was like, what if we made AI that could was so good at reading like the Bible and so good at like knowing this text that it could actually start doing sermons. Like we had sermon bots and stuff like that. Or maybe a robot that teaches a Bible study or something like that. Do you think that's within the realm? I think that's within the realm of possibility. I could definitely see that being a thing.
I have to wonder, if we had an AI that was that good, would it start to believe in anything? Or would it be more like us and debunk the crap out of it and go, here's the logical problem, here's the logical problem? I mean, what would that... okay, one of my favorite movies, perhaps my very favorite movie, is Tron. And the more I watch it, the more I realize just how much Christian symbolism is in there, because there is a lot. But it's still an interesting world where the programs look at their users as their creators, which they are. I mean, there's actually one line, if I don't have a user, then who wrote me, right? Like I said, Christian symbolism in there. But, I mean, would a computer, an intelligent AI, look at humans that way as their creator? I mean, what could a computer believe as its religious beliefs if it did?
Are AIs even capable of beliefs though? Can we even say that's a thing? Like, I guess it has like a view about reality, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, this is something that I've thought about a lot, is what makes me me, what makes you you, why are we people? Because a lot of folks seem to have this notion that if it's not made out of meat, it can't be a real person. But as I see it, I am what my brain does. My brain makes me. If my brain turns off, I turn off. Now, if my brain happened to be mechanical, really, what's the difference? You know, I mean, I've thought a lot of people will say, what if I can upload my consciousness into a machine? Well, you can't, because all you'd be doing is copying yourself. But if you wanted to make yourself into a machine, what if you had a lot of little nanobots that could go in and piecemeal, bit by bit, synapse by synapse, replace your brain with a machine? It has the same function, and you maintained continuity of consciousness. Could you turn yourself into a machine that way, or would it be slowly killing you? I mean, technically, you wouldn't be biological anymore, but is the you gone? Is the self gone? So if a computer had a brain, if there was an intelligence that was mechanical in nature rather than biological in nature, what stops it from being a person? Why is that barrier there?
This is the entire plot to Westworld. Yeah.
Well, you know, and it's funny, I've never actually seen Westworld. Heck, I haven't even seen the Yul Brynner movie.
You just had this. Wait.
I need to catch up on, but
you just gave this entire gave this entire monologue about consciousness and robots and brains, and you haven't seen Westworld? That is shocking to me. That is pretty wild.
I've been thinking about this for decades now.
It's true. And Westworld's actually an older movie. A lot of people don't realize that.
That's what I said. I haven't even seen the Yul Brynner movie. I've worked in 4 video stores. I know it exists, but I'm not a huge fan of Westerns like Firefly, yay, but otherwise, So I never did watch it.
Yeah. And, we got to have a sci-fi themed Truth Wanted episode sometime, and maybe get you back for that, because I know you're real into the sci-fi, and that's really great. I love that kind of stuff. We definitely don't have enough of those kinds of conversations here. Are you ready for another call?
Sure.
Let's do it. I want to go to Alex in Rhode Island. Alex, what's going on, man?
Hi, guys. You can hear me properly, right?
I can hear you just fine. What's up?
Okay. Sorry, the call screener's having a hard time hearing me. So I've been thinking a lot, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related to religion and matters of the supernatural, but a lot of times I have conversations with people, and they're not always precise or accurate in what they're talking about, and like some of it is kind of pedantic. Like, I get mad when people call my dog a Labradoodle and she's actually a Golden Doodle, and you know, if I correct you multiple times on this sort of thing, it's like, well, do you not care about being, you know, as accurate and as well represented as possible with, what you're going through and asserting what you're going through and relaying. It's really confusing to me. And I don't know if are these people being inaccurate and imprecise just with these minor things, or do they extend it with everything in their life? And I don't know if I should try to push people to, use more precise language. Like if you're unclear about something, make sure you really, voice that rather than just, talking about something in a way that asserts you actually know it if you don't.
Yeah. I immediately have an answer for this, and then I want to hear Kate. I know, but like this is, I have, the reason why I want to go first is because my experience with this is visceral. Because there's a video of me out there back when I was a Christian, and I'm talking to Anthony Magnabosco, and I described myself as an atheist. I said I was once an atheist before, and if you listen to the way I kind of described it, and even now looking back at my own experiences, I don't think most atheists would agree with me that I actually was an atheist. Now, nobody actually ever told me at the time, oh, you're not really an atheist. There's different terms and how people use this and stuff. I kind of figured that out on my own. But even just a baseline description of my experiences using that language kind of influence my worldview a bit. And I think you have a point of sometimes the way that we describe things and the words that we're kind of using, the imprecision kind of makes it hard for us to communicate the ideas that we want to communicate. When I talked with Anthony, he did a great thing with me, and he immediately started asking me about my definitions and how I was using it. And as long as he understood the way I was particularly using it in that context, he was able to make some ground with me. And he even pushed back a little bit. He's like, I wouldn't describe atheists that way, but that's okay. And then I kind of asked him, like, how would you describe it and stuff? And then we kind of had conversations about that. I think if you're going to talk to anybody, especially about real heavy topics like this, starting off the conversation by talking about definitions and talking about like how we're using these words and the precision is good, because that makes people kind of look into things more. When you're saying like, there's other points of view that say something else, that's going to put in people's minds, maybe I should look into this more. Maybe I'm not kind of describing things right. I know that's what happened with me. I can't say that's going to work for everybody, but like that kind of made a little push in my mind of, maybe I don't know about as much about this as I kind of thought I did.
Some pretty visceral reactions to people being imprecise with their language too. I mean, I had to create the word apistivist because there was no way to say that I am someone who does not use faith to come to conclusions. That word just didn't exist, and I had to create it. And trying to explain to people that is part of my worldview, my mindset, without having the word was really difficult. And trying to explain to people that I'm an agnostic atheist and explaining to them that a more pedantic version of the word agnostic was actually more useful than the more traditional definition, it has caused a lot of conflict, not just for me personally, but throughout the entire atheist community. But I do think that it's been for the good that we've been a little more pedantic about some of these words, just because it helps us describe ourselves better. And some of you know I've had some arguments with people whose names I'm not going to say, specifically about the utility of these words. And it's been kind of a struggle. But at the same time, there's also a certain amount of moderation, because if you're too pedantic, you can really start to make people angry. But like I said, for me, it can be kind of visceral. When I hear people use a word incorrectly, some part of me is like, or even if there's multiple ways to use a word, but based on my upbringing, my culture, I use it a different way, it can still make me a little bit grouchy. And I have to hold myself back sometimes from correcting people. Like that, I moved from New England to Washington State, to Seattle. And every time after I moved, I heard someone say pop instead of soda. Some part of me would just rebel. I'm like, pop is a nickname for dad, or what weasels do in songs. It's not fizzy sugar drinks, that's soda, right? Things like that. can really kind of get under my skin. And maybe that's a failing on my part, maybe not. But I try to not be too uber pedantic about it, because it can really make other people just as grouchy if you're correcting them all the time. So you really have to pick and choose your battles there. Yeah, I mean, okay, another one, because of we're in the sort of skeptic community. And so people are always talking about whether things have been proved or not, except nobody uses the word proved anymore. It's everything is proven now. And I actually found a graph that over time, the use of one versus the other has changed, that proven used to be used a lot less. And I don't know why, but in my world, if something is proven, it means it's tried and true. Like a trusted friend is a proven friend. But a theory or a hypothesis has been proved when you have the evidence and experiments to show that it is so, right? And I know a lot of people will get pedantic saying nothing is ever actually proved in science. It's just shown beyond reasonable doubt at the moment based on what we know already and all of that stuff. So again, pedantry can get you into some serious arguments with people.
Yeah. I wanted to bring something up before we got a chance to hear from you, Alex, but something we had learned in communication studies, and I was trying to look up because I couldn't remember the exact name. It's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and maybe you've heard of this before. And there's kind of two versions of this. The strong one is saying that our thought and linguistic categories determine our cognition in some way. So the fact that we didn't have language for something may not have actually been up in our minds as something that existed. And I think the example that I heard in my class was the concept of like marital rape wasn't as charged as much and wasn't as much of a thing in our culture until I think it was the 1970s or something. And when that phrase started coming into use, suddenly like we started to charge people a lot more for these kinds of crimes because there were so many people under the belief that like rape couldn't happen in a marriage, like in those kinds of relationships and stuff. And because we had the language to describe this phenomenon now, that people were kind of more cognizant and realizing of this. The weaker version says that our categories, our linguistic categories, are only influence our thoughts and decisions. Don't actually make up the structure of how we understand things. And there's been research kind of both ways. I'm not an expert on this particular hypothesis, but I do know that it's something that people have actually been looking into. And I would say, no matter what, words matter. Words are important. You should definitely figure out what those words are before you start using them. What do you think, Alex?
I think, this is just something I found, is, there is a process of kind of training yourself to use more precise language to, get to the point of what you're saying, to, use terms that more accurately describe. I mean, nobody's born with that skill. And I think on some level, it's not too much to ask for people to be a little bit more careful about the words that they choose. I don't want to be cynical here, but one of the things that really ticked me off was when I was an undergrad still, my mother would represent my major as something that wasn't even offered as a major. It wasn't even like on the roster. And I'm like, are you just saying this to impress all your friends? So it seems like I'm doing something big and bold, even though technically, I'm doing one thing, but the label you're ascribing to it isn't even a possible label to give it. And, doing it once is like, okay, fine, maybe not a mistake. And then you keep repeating that same mistake. At a certain point, it's no longer an honest mistake. You are deliberately trying to mislead people. And I think there's a very fine line between, all right, this person got it wrong because, maybe they weren't totally familiar with it. Maybe it's the first time they heard of something and they're talking about it. Maybe information has changed since they first became familiar with it. And then I really want to make sure that people, trust me on this because I want to mislead them. And so I'm going to purposely say things that aren't completely correct or accurate. And then I'm going to go and, assert it in a way that makes people not go and fact check because, I'm sounding convincing enough about it where people are going to take my word for it, but I'm actually not. I used to do this all the time when I was a kid. I wasn't allowed to have roaches in the house, so I'd say, oh, those are beetles. They're not roaches because they look similar enough to most people. People, it's a weird thing. When I think about things with religion, and I think religion gets where it is by being wishy-washy, because people will say like soul, spirit, and another essence, and they all supposed to mean the same thing, even though some people say they mean different things, and nobody has a concrete definition of it. It's all really frustrating stuff.
Oh yeah, like spiritual, right? That word just means absolutely nothing to me anymore. When someone describes themselves as spiritual, I don't know what that means. I really don't. And there's tons of other words like that too. As far as like faith is, like we were kind of talking about before.
Yes.
Faith is an interesting one because again, people are totally using different definitions when they're talking about faith.
I've had arguments with theists where they switch which definition of faith they're using mid-sentence. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. I think what it is, Alex, is it's a combination of things. I think there's definitely people out there who are trying to use the language and they think that they know it and they don't know it. And also it's just trying to express ideas that they have and they aren't doing it accurately enough. And that could be a problem too. If you don't like, a lot of people don't realize this, especially when we're talking about religious topics. Like, there's a lot of education that goes into the stuff that we kind of talk about. Like Bionic Dance and I didn't get into this just on the fly. Like, there's a lot of research and stuff that has to go into like understanding the philosophy and understanding religious history and stuff. And not everybody has that experience. In fact, most people don't. They're coming in from their cultural assumptions and their backgrounds and the religion that they grew up in, and that's kind of the lens by which they view the world. So, to me, I'm not as upset with other people when people are saying these kinds of, especially kind of ignorant things when it comes to like religious stuff, because I understand like, yeah, it took a lot to get from the person I was before to the person I was now, and if I can help somebody on that path to kind of at least be more informed about their decisions, right? Whether or not they're going to change their beliefs is another thing, but at least be more informed about what we're talking about when we have these conversations. I'm grateful to have those opportunities most of the time.
And like you say, people don't realize quite what goes into making this kind of content. I mean, sometimes people will quote someone out of context and hunting down the actual quote to find out what that person actually meant. I mean, not in my most recent video, but the video before that, this one dude quote mined like this geneticist, this atheist geneticist so hard that it completely changed the message of what he was saying. And I had to hunt down that quote and find it, which was not easy. And I have a video that just processed. I haven't uploaded it yet because I'm on this show. And the dude was quoting the Bible, and I had to get out exactly the chapter and verse, but not just the chapter and verse, but the version of the Bible he was using, because he wasn't using the King James, all of that stuff. And then, and that's nothing compared to the people who argue with creationists about evolution. I mean, they know more about science than I ever will, right? I mean, I'm when it comes to science, I'm more of a science fiction fan. I'm just saying, that's not my forte is science. And these people, they look so amazing to me. The amount of research they do, the knowledge they have, it's wild. And like the amount of effort that goes into making sure that we are not talking out of our butts. I mean, seriously, you should see behind the scenes. It's not the same as what you see on camera.
Yeah. And I'll say this, Alex, I think, patience in this case is a virtue. I'm thankful for the people that were patient for me when I was having these kinds of conversations with people who didn't straight up say I was an idiot, I was dumb, and everything I believe was stupid. Because, I read those comments eventually, right? Like that eventually happened. But the people that I got to have face-to-face conversations with, right, the most meaningful ones, were super helpful to me, even if I was wrong about a lot of that previous stuff. I mean, obviously, I'm no longer a Christian, and I'm here now. I'm looking forward to improving my beliefs, as I think as we all should, about all kinds of topics and stuff. And I think we can't always make the assumption that the person that you're talking to, like, you just know more than them about that thing. I think engaging with them and seeing what their experiences are like. Bill Nye has that quote, I think, that says like everybody in the world knows something that you don't. I think that's attributed to him. And I love that quote because it's like, yeah, that's true. And that's a humbling thing. even with the education I've received, there's plenty of people that are smarter than me, and plenty of people that just know more about all kinds of stuff that I wish I could know, just like Bionic Dance was saying. But
it's funny how sometimes you can be accused of being anything other than humble, despite the fact that you're telling people, here's stuff I know I don't know. Right. And like you're saying, I can't make a conclusion on this. I can't give you a definitive answer because to do so would be hubris. And I've started putting bloopers at the end of my videos to show people how perfect I'm not. And also because it makes them laugh. But I mean, and then to be accused of having no humility, I'm like, dude, I just made myself look like an ass for you. How not humble am I over here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully, Alex, that answered your question. Was that good? We good, Alex?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah, we kind of talked for a while there, but I'm glad you called in. It was a great question, and thanks for calling. Hope to hear from you again.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Have a good evening.
All right. See you later. Yeah, you know what I think of it as? I think of it as it's a process. It's an attitude. Really, it's an attitude that we should have. This idea of I am open to having my mind change about things. Right, I'm open-minded. I try to be. I want to give everybody that same kind of chance when it comes to because I've talked to a lot of people who other people would describe as crazy and some of the stuff that they say, and it's easy to just humiliate people right then and there. It's easy to just say, oh, this guy doesn't know about X, Y, and Z. They didn't do the research on this. But if you take people step by step, if you take people through kind of the process, there's a real satisfaction there in seeing people kind of change their mind on that kind of stuff, which is something that I wish more people could experience.
I think most atheist content creators have had the experience where someone says, if it weren't for you, I'd still be a theist. Thank you for helping me through this transition, this journey to atheism, to realizing the fallacies of religion. And it makes it all worth it in the end, because it can get really you can get really tired after a while. Like I said, I've been doing this more than a decade, and it can get a bit wearying at times. It's like if it weren't for the fact that I think it's important to keep doing it, because if we shut up, the theists aren't gonna. They win if we're not a contrasting voice out there. And even if it's not about winning or losing, there does have to be a counterpoint. There does have to be a check on people's assumptions, right? So when you get those people who say to you, that was a good point, you've changed my mind on something, I see where you're coming from now. It like I say, it makes it all worth it. It's a good feeling to know that you've done that. But of course, like you say, you do have to have that humility to have your own mind changed, to be able to check your own assumptions. And not everyone is willing to do it, even on the atheist side. And I've been accused of that too. And maybe I do have that problem in some areas. I don't know.
We all have that problem.
It's hard to have that self-reflection sometimes. It's not always easy to do, because we're not always rational people, no matter what we try.
Yeah, I mean, as human beings, we have that problem, right? We got to extend that grace that we'd be willing to extend ourselves when it comes to that kind of stuff. And some people are real malicious about it, but for the most part, at least the people I talk to, I'm talking to the average person on the street. I'm talking to people who, again, haven't looked into the same things I have, and so their view on things are going to be different, and it's just kind of the way it is, We got three more.
If there's anyone, real quick, if there's anyone in the San Diego area, every Saturday, although not this Saturday, we're canceled for rain, but I help staff an atheism booth in Balboa Park here in San Diego. And so we're talking to the public all the time. And it is interesting to talk to the people that don't even realize that atheism is a thing the way it is now, and to talk to them and to hear some of the assumptions they have. So it's definitely eye-opening when you haven't been in the religious scene to talk to these people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great shout out. We got 3 more calls, and I'd love to get to all 3 of them before you have to go here, Bionic Dance. So maybe if we could rapid fire just a little bit more on these, I'd love that. I want to get to Jess now in Bradley Beach, New Jersey. What's up, Jess?
How you doing?
Hey, what's up, man?
I'm I was so psyched when I saw Bionic Dance on.
Yeah,
I
me
was
too.
really
Me too.
psyched. I was really psyched because I'm really into her.
Aw.
Anyway, I wanted to say that, I had a brain injury 35 years ago, and I go to support groups, and I was at one on Tuesday, and it was driving me crazy because they're all saying how good God is, and they're getting them better. And I was like biting my tongue because I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, figuratively, of course. And it's just, what about yourself? And like, what about the doctors? And, and it's like, what is your God doing? Like, he's the one that made you have this problem, gave you this problem in the first place. It just drives me up the wall.
Mm.
Well, I mean, for those of you who don't know, for some context, I was having seizures. They started about 7-8 years ago. And about 7 months ago, I think it was in October, I had some brain surgery to get rid of the seizures. And I thank my doctor for that, not God. Okay, if God was involved, it was not in any way obvious. All I know is I had someone who was a trained medical professional who stuck a needle in my head and got rid of those seizures. So, yeah, that's who I thank.
Yeah. Well, I've got seizures every once in a while too. But I have a very good neurologist, and he's helping me out with those.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they're just saying how much better he's making their lives and stuff like.
The medical thing,
like,
it's kind of interesting. I think people rationalize it by there is kind of a karmic influence in Christian beliefs. Like obviously the theology may not actually support that, but in the common kind of Christian parlance, there is kind of this idea of, oh, well, this is because you did this bad thing, and now this is kind of the result of that. And I have seen that happen. Like, I remember going to a church and a woman who was a paraplegic was on stage and was talking about how this injury that happened to her kind of taught her about how to love and trust God more and all this and that. And looking back on that now, it's kind of awful to see from my perspective, right? Because it's like, oh, wow, like this was the way this lesson had to be taught, like through this awful thing that I'm sure has caused you so much pain and agony. And it is kind of frustrating to see people talk about it in kind of positive terms, right? Like, and what people do.
I guess they need to find something good to look towards.
Yeah.
So, I guess that they have to find something good in it. And so they go for God. And that's the one thing that everybody is so gung-ho on, being good. And but they don't look under all of the negative things, like slavery, like Matt always says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember first time I got my, I had appendicitis when I was like 12 years old, so I had to get my appendix removed. And I think that was one of my first thoughts of, well, why was this? Because I was learning more about this organ that I had in me that I didn't know apparently like didn't do anything for the most part. It was like, well, why was this thing in here in the first place, and why do I have to get this taken out? Because my pastor at the time came to my hospital, and I remember he kind of prayed over me and laid his hands right over my appendix to make sure that, and it hurt really bad. I don't think he should have touched me there, but he kind of did this prayer of like, pray for the surgeons to kind of take care of this stuff. And at the time, I kind of remember wondering, like, okay, like, why is this even happening in the first place? Like, is this one of those things where I'm supposed to learn like a grand lesson out of this? Is there some sort of narrative that I'm kind of missing on? But I just had surgery for a thing and it got removed.
If God existed, why would you have this horrible thing happening to you?
Yeah, and is he going to pay for the health insurance costs? Like, is
if
that
God is all loving? Why would I have this face? No, I'm kidding. But
why wouldn't he just make you like that in the first place? He wouldn't make you want to have to learn something. I mean, he's God, for Christ's sake. Why couldn't he just make us like that? Why would he have to put us through all this shit to get us to be that way?
one of my arguments against specifically the Christian God, I mean, you hear about the problem of evil. I keep telling them the problem of evil goes away the very instant you admit that, yeah, God can screw up, right? If God isn't supposed to be 100% perfect, then the problem of evil is not a problem anymore. But they insist that God is perfectly loving, all-powerful, all-knowing, and that God logically cannot exist given the evidence we see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jess, I gotta say, I know it's frustrating, but keep it up, man. You got people who are friends with you here, and I'm sure other people like on the ACA Discord and stuff. Love to talk about some of those experiences. We had another guy calling in a few weeks ago about these kinds of sessions and stuff that they were having with their therapy.
Yeah, it's probably me.
Okay, I was wondering, like, is this the same person? But yeah. So, like, you know, I'm keep it up, man, because there's other people that feel the same way. I've seen similar posts on Reddit and other places talking about, like, yeah, my therapy group is kind of talking about religion, and this is like really uncomfortable and stuff, and it can be kind of awkward to be the atheist in the room, right?
I've also got a friend who's trying to get sober right now, and I keep telling her, find secular AA or they will force religion on you.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, that's, that was me. That was, this is, the second time I've called in. And also, I sent you an email. Did you get that by chance?
I think so. I get a lot of emails, but I can double check. I remember your email. Haha. Yes, I do. I think I responded to it. But
I haven't gotten it so far.
Okay.
I don't think so. Anyway.
I was having some disclosure for some people, because I was sending responses to people, and there was a problem with the way that Outlook was kind of syncing with my stuff, and it wasn't going out to some people, and I kind of found that out after the fact. So if you didn't get a response from me, that might be the reason why. I had to kind of catch up on some stuff, but
okay, no problem. Just checking, that's all.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jess, thanks again for calling again. Even when it seemed like I didn't respond to your email the first time, I'm glad you still called into the show.
Oh, no problem at all. No problem.
Cool.
Got it. Bionic Dance is so good talking to you. Really, definitely good talk with you.
And would I recognize a username?
Just Jesse.
Okay.
Brenda and Jesse. I love it. That's a tag team duo.
I don't know, I'm so used to people with usernames like Zagnar the Destroyer 12 or something. So.
Right? Yeah, super crazy. Thanks again for calling, and I can't wait to hear from you again. Man, yeah, I can't imagine what that's like. I mean, like, I've been in uncomfortable situations where people were talking about the religion and stuff, but like when you're going through kind of that healing process and stuff, and you just want to talk to other people who feel the same way, I imagine that's got to be amplified even tougher, right? Yep. Well, we got 2 more calls here that I want to get to before the end of the night, and I know you got your game night here, so let's see if we can pull through. This is Adam in North Carolina. Adam, what's going on?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I guess I wanted to maybe give Bionic Dance an explanation for why science can't prove anything.
Oh no, I understand all of that. I was just talking about the casual versus pedantic language people use when they're talking about proof.
Well, but I would say it always irks me, and tell me if you disagree with this. Whenever anyone says science has proven this, I would have qualms with that statement.
Oh, so would I. I mean, science has tentatively shown things to be the most likely, if that's one way to put it. But because people are less precise with their language and it's just plain easier, saying science proved it is, let's say, shorthand for that longer thing I just said.
I guess I would agree. I guess here I'll give you can tell me whether you disagree with this or not. I'll give you a short diatribe. But the way I view science is like a dartboard, where people throw a dart and they have to claim why it's a bullseye. Now, no one even really knows if they ever hit a bullseye, but one person throws a dart and it doesn't even hit the board, and the other person throws a dart that hits the board, and they say, well, since we know the bullseye is on the board, my dart is a bullseye because it's on the board. But then the next person hits something inside the colored area of the board, and they're like, okay, we know that the board parts that have color that are like painted on, that's where the bullseye is. So each person makes a more progressive claim why they're closer to the truth, but no one ever actually says that they have the truth. It's just somehow showing through time that you're closer to the truth. And I think when we say things like science has proven this, then we almost end the scientific process, and we're saying, well, we're done, it's proven, it's over.
Well, I'm not sure I would have used a dartboard for that metaphor, but I take your meaning, because when people are doing science, they get closer to that bullseye, not because they've just sort of thrown a dart and hoped. That usually it's more a matter of, it's an iterative process. It's, well, we got closer to a reasonable explanation this time, but what needs improving? How do we show our work better? And that's less of a dart throw and more of like, I would think of it like echolocation, I suppose, where it's like you make a sound, you get feedback, you go, well, was I close? Let me try from over here, get more feedback. Was I closer or was I further off? And you sort of zero in as you go. So I think it's less uncertain than a dartboard. But I think I understand what you were getting at, and I would agree in principle.
And I kind of like, and I'm going to throw one back at you too, I like that echolocation because we're kind of getting closer and closer and closer and getting down to the millimeters, the micrometers. We're getting ever so closer to what is truth. And probably the biggest problem with science right now is that we don't retest things. People say that we've figured it out, and you've got everyone trying to figure everything out through mountains of research. And then as soon as someone publishes something, because people have to publish, then people stop really investigating it. You don't see people redo that experiment. So I think some of science, I'm not saying, obviously, we understand gravity, we understand evolution, we understand lots of things. But there's a lot of science that might be due to random chance, i.e. you can get a p-value below 0.05 1 out of 20 times, and people publish that. So we might have a lot of science that might not be the best explanation. People just kind of publish what they found, and we need to repeat the science.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree. I mean, it's probably not the explanation, or it's probably not the best explanation we can get, but it's what we've got so far. And we need to improve our investigation methods and our ability to investigate to actually get to the real answer. And I actually addressed this in one of my more recent videos where I was talking about how people used to think that maggots would show up on spoiled food by magic because they didn't have the ability to see the microscopic eggs yet. Right. And it wasn't until we invented magnifying glasses and microscopes that we could see those and realize, no, this was in no way a sorcerous process. Right. And so there's probably a lot of things that we're not able to detect yet, or that we can't accurately measure yet. And so you do have to check your assumptions, or you turn science into a faith-based religion. Well, someone came up with this thing a long time ago, and we'll just assume it's correct no matter what. I mean, all of science has to be vulnerable to new evidence, to new data, to new methods. Has to be, or you're doing it wrong.
And if I might add, I can't remember who I read this from. I think this was like P.Z. Myers or one of those like older atheist writers or something like that. But they were talking about the Earth and like how our understanding of the Earth, there was a belief, and of course this isn't what everybody believed, but there was a belief that the Earth was flat at some point, and then eventually that view kind of turned to a sphere, and then now that's like an oblate spheroid. But it never went backwards from there. Now, except for the flat Earth movement. But that aside, right? Another example I would think of is like epicycles. We used to think that the stars were kind of and our planets had these epicycles, and that was kind of our explanation as to why they kind of moved back in the sky as they were going across. When really we kind of figured out, we're actually a rotating body around another thing, and we've never gone back to that epicycles explanation. Right. And I can't think of any prominent examples where something like that, where it's been like, oh, no, like actually we have to go back to this other 100-year-old explanation to kind of explain things. Maybe there are some out there. And if there are, I'd love to hear it. But there always seems to be at least a sense of progress. Right. There's at least some information we can rule out. And by ruling out some information, we can expose ourselves to new information and kind of figure out where we are from there.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. There was something that I think it was Einstein came up with this idea, this hypothesis, and it seemed completely accurate. And then later someone came along and said, I didn't do that thing quite right, or here's something new. And now we realize Einstein was wrong about this little thing. I don't remember what it was. Like I said before, I'm more into science fiction than science, but I do remember hearing a case like that.
Interesting. What do you think, Adam?
Well, I just wanted to thank you guys for your thoughts, and thank you, BionicDance, for the content. And I'll say one more thing, I guess. I think maybe science makes proclamations about the natural world, and the solution to anything science gets wrong is more science. And one last thing, it's not a pop, it's not a soda, everything's a Coke.
Oh, don't get me started.
Thanks, guys.
I love it. Thank you, Adam, for that great call. I was reading, I have the information here from the call screeners and stuff, and I read that, he wants to prove how, or talk about how science doesn't prove anything. And I was like, this is a conversation where we might have to, argue with someone, or at least, explore that a bit. But I think we ended up pretty much agreeing there, or at least kind of, giving our own definitions of what we thought. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, our difference really was purely in terms of terminology. I mean, I think we agreed conceptually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the philosophy of science is so interesting to me. I remember when I first discovered Karl Popper and reading about all this black swans and stuff like that. These ideas of falsifiability and how we can come to the conclusions that we do is such a fascinating topic to me. And I haven't talked about Karl Popper as much on this show before, but those kinds of ideas, I mean, we've talked about falsifiability. I mean, that's something we talk about all the time, especially as skeptics and stuff, right? It's this idea of how can we know that things are true, and we want the truth, and that's why I have the name of this show. So it's a whole thing. But anyway, I have one more call for you, BionicDance, and this is from Elijah in, looks like Rowlett. And Elijah, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, why don't you ask BionicDance your question?
All right.
Uh-oh, that smile makes me worried.
You mentioned that you're going to your game night after this. I was just curious as to what games you're playing and, what kind of RPGs you're into, tabletops.
Well, okay. Granted, this is not so much an RPG thing as a board game thing, but I do enjoy the occasional RPG. I mean, I've played a fair amount of D&D. Who hasn't? I've played some of the White Wolf series, like the vampire and werewolf stuff. And let's see, gosh, I know I've done other things, but those are the main ones. I mean, a little bit of Shadowrun here and there, that kind of thing. But this is a board game night that I'm going to, and we play a lot of things my personal favorite is Clank in Space. We play some Gizmos, Secret Hitler. Let's see, a lot of people like Settlers of Catan, but I'm not the world's biggest fan. There's, let's see, Puerto Rico and Jamaica and Port Royale. I like the first two, but not the third one. Let's see, of course, Cards Against Humanity comes up every couple of weeks, but it's not always something we play. And I mean, people will just show up with these big, huge, backpacks full of games, and we just plunk them down on a table, and everyone decides which one they want to play. I have if you've ever played Portal, the video game Portal, there's actually a board game for that. And let's see what else. Gloom is another one, although I prefer Gloom in Space, which is really fun. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, like I say, there's a lot of different games, and that's the sort of thing, though. I mean, there was an old lady once showed up to our board game night thinking it was going to be like backgammon and checkers, and we felt so bad for her.
No. You should have got her into Dungeons and Dragons. You should have made her like a warrior and created a character right there. Just get her in. Just get her in,
Yeah.
Have you tried Betrayal at the House on the Hill?
Sorry, what was that?
Have you tried Betrayal at the House on the Hill?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, only once or twice, but yeah.
Listen, if it's in the store...
Hold on, remind me. That's the one where everyone starts out they have to guess the person, the room, and the object like Clue, but you're given these cards that have weird things that the person who's sort of like the dungeon master, I forget what it's called, storyteller, ghost, whatever, you have to guess from the card they give you the character or the room based on the traits of the card. Is that the one?
No. Betrayal at the House on the Hill is where everybody starts out there like you're like investigating a haunted house, and it's got a stack of tiles, and you pull flip
Oh,
over a
that
random room and
one.
attach it,
Okay.
and then you find the
Nerds.
magic items, and then halfway through, like all of a sudden, one of you or sometimes none of you become the bad
Okay.
guy, and then you gotta split up and then fight against each other, and then like a horror movie. I love that game so much. I got the
What
expansion.
am I thinking of? I think it might be Mysterium. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
Yeah, it's
But I have
Mysterium.
played Betrayal on the House of the Hill, yes, and that one's actually a lot of fun. I know the one you mean now.
The urge to stuff someone in a locker is rising within me. I'm just kidding. I'm into that. I mean, I wish I had a dedicated group of people that I could play board games with every week. I would love that. I love playing like Munchkin, and I actually like Catan. I think it's pretty fun. I recently discovered there's a dice version of the game, and I've played that, and that's kind of cool. But yeah, this is a fun.
Was it King of Tokyo, which is basically Monster Yahtzee? That one's fun.
Yes, that one's hilarious and awesome. Oh, have you played the Legendary series from Topps?
No.
Any of them?
No.
Oh! If you get a chance to get a hold of those, you should try that. You literally get to. They have like a Marvel one that has like 98 million expansions, but it allows you to play like you set up your own super team and you fight villains from the Marvel universe, and you get to buy these cards, and then you're like whooping people's tail with like Hulk. You're all hulked out and like or like Ant-Man and the Wasp, and they all have powers that are based off of the powers that they have in the comic books that make the cards work together and like combos and stuff. Oh, it's so good. I love it.
It's not getting hated, but I burned out on superheroes a while back because it's like the movies were oversaturated, too many, too often. If it's not Deadpool or The Incredibles, I'm probably not interested. In fact, there are a couple of entertainment channels on YouTube that I was subscribed to until they stopped doing a lot of pop culture and nothing but MCU videos. And I was like, dude, enough, okay? Occasional videos, please. Not every video. Here's this Easter egg you didn't see. Here's why this actor wasn't in it. Here's why this character died. I'm like, enough.
I just want to point out, my girlfriend is in the chat, and she's saying, Dan, you're literally the biggest nerd I know. This is true. I am a huge nerd. I don't want to off-put any of my nerd friends, because if we started talking, oh my God, if we started talking about like the lore of Fallout or something, like I might lose my mind. And, stuff like that.
Okay, I probably shouldn't touch my camera, but I have the whole, you can't even see it, bobblehead collection up there on my shelf.
Nice.
The Pit Boy, Fallout Boy, whatever.
I've seen some of it in your videos, I think. That's great.
Yeah.
But anyway, this was a fun side conversation. I'm glad we got to have this right at the end. Thanks for calling about this, Elijah.
Oh, sure. I just wanted to say one more thing. If you want to, the Legendary game just isn't just for superheroes. They have like all kinds of cool ones. They're coming out with James Bond here coming up, and they've got like X-Files, and they got licenses for everything because it's Topps. So, but it's really cool. It's really cool.
Okay.
You should check it out if you get a chance.
Well, I'll talk to the other gamers at game night about it. Maybe someone has it and just hasn't brought it. I mean, Jason, if anybody, not that you know Jason, but he shows up like Jason. You know those rolly bags that people have when they come on airplanes.
Yeah. We all know Jason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, seriously, he brings a rolly bag full of board games to every game night, and so if anyone has it, it's probably him.
Awesome.
That sounds awesome. Okay. Well, it's nice talking to y'all.
Yeah. Thanks again, Elijah. That was, again, just really fun and totally off topic. Truth Wanted, your #1 source for hot board game tips and materials. This is now the show. So if you didn't like that last call, we're slowly transitioning to only talking about board games now. And that's just going to be it. So talking about alienating our subscribers, right, with different content. This is my new thing now. It's just the board games. So...
I don't know. I mean, at some point we should start talking about virtual reality.
Oh, look at that. She's primed and ready to go to the virtual world. Well, Kate, this has been just a great time. I'm so glad you got to be on the show. Where can people find you at?
Well, if you type in Bionic Dance, all one word, you can find my YouTube channel, my Twitter, my Facebook group. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, you won't be sorry if you do. In fact, if you don't, you'll be sorry because I'll send my minions after you. You've been warned. So, yeah, that's where you want to just look for me under Bionic Dance.
Sweet. And as always, folks, this is Truth Wanted. This is a show that comes on live every week at 7 o'clock Central Time. You can find us on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you like to get your podcasts at. We do have a Patreon where you can help support the show. That's at patreon.com/truthwanted. I'm on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. Go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And join us next time if you're watching this from home. Join us live in the chat and stuff. We like to have a good time. It's really fun here. Is there anything else that you want to say before we head out of here?
Nothing immediately comes to mind. No. I should have thought of that beforehand, but no, I just subscribe to my channel.
There you go. And also you can find me at truth@atheist-community.org if you want to contact me in inquiries about the show. Other than that, that's a wrap. This was another great episode of Truth Wanted. Kate, thanks again for being on. And thank you, listeners, for supporting the show. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.